Caitriona, this Outland finale just knocked me out. I don't know the books. I don't know the story. So the three big reveals in this finale, from the rape of Jamie to his response to that rape, and then the baby bombshell at the end. Wow, wow, wow. What a way to go out of a very interesting,
we thought we'd try and pack as much into the last step as we could, you know.
Well, talk about shooting that whole episode. That had to be extraordinary.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we shot 15 and 16 together, so it was, you know, it was very heavy stuff. But I think, you know, as actors, we all kind of relished the challenges. But it was funny. It was, you know, Tobias and Sam had about, you know, a week's rehearsal with a lot of their more intense stuff, and as that was going on, I was sort of shooting the end of eps 13 and 14, and I was living in the traveling circus land, I think, and they were sort of concentrating on that. So I think they had a little bit of time to sort of get ready to get in that mindset. But I remember when we switched over from one block to the next, it was just, you know, it was just really intense. And it was, you know, it was a great place to bring the characters, though. You know, so much changes for Claire and Jamie's relationship, and so much changes for Claire. And it was just, it was, yeah, it was very challenging material, but it was really nice place to go.
The big jaw dropper, of course, in that episode, aside from the baby news at the end, for those of us who didn't know it, is Jamie's revelation to Claire that that there was a moment when he actually liked the rape, and that he considered that the great betrayal of Claire. Just talk about your own insight into that, because that delves into all kinds of interesting psychological layers that we don't normally see in a TV show. This kind of brutal sexual honesty, and then here's this 1945 woman transported back to the 18th century, and to see the reaction through your eyes and your characters. I'd just like to know your point of view on all of that.
Well, I think, you know, this was the great sort of genius of Blackjack, was to poison the one safe haven that Jamie really had. And, you know, I think he was able to very clearly pinpoint that there was something, you know, very intense and you know, metaphysical about their relationship, and that the love that they have for each other is something quite extraordinary. And when he poisons that, and when he brings Jamie to a place of complete just despair, and the only way to sort of get through it is to, in some way, I don't know, I guess he had to enjoy some aspect of it. But, you know, I think for Claire, it just breaks her heart. And I think, you know, to play that is to see someone that you love, and to see them be so utterly destroyed, and whatever about the abuse that he suffered, it's also, you know, how he feels about himself, and how he's unable to forgive himself, and that is just the worst thing that she could ever see in him. You know, it just breaks her heart completely, and I think that, you know, it's a real testament to how strong their love is, and to, you know, to realize that nothing could ever really break the bond that they've formed. But it's also, she had to realize that this is a totally new landscape for both of them. And is that my bell?
No, that's my stupid phone. I didn't turn it off. Well, you know, something almost broke the bond between them, and that was that one night you go to the Stones, and you almost go back to 1945, assuming that your contact with the Stones would take you there. And that was a very interesting moment, because up until she confronts that stone, Claire really wants to go. And all of a sudden, we don't actually see her pull back. We see the next, which I find a fascinating part of the shooting of that scene. We then see her by the fire with Jamie, that she has decided to stay. Why do you think she decided suddenly to stay?
Well, I think when she runs for the Stones, and when she makes that break, it's like an instinctual thing. You know, I think so much of her journey up until that point had been this singular focus to get back to that time, and to get back home, and to get back to the world as she knows it. So when she sees them in front of her by accident, and when that's sort of just placed before her, it's almost like she doesn't think about it. I'm sorry, I'm a bit confusing things. Are you talking about when Jamie brings her back and the decision that she makes then, or yeah? Sorry, I'm confusing
Yes,
it.
yes, no, exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So no, when Jamie brings her back, I mean, I'm not sure that it's, you know, I think it had to be a difficult decision. I mean, I think that even though, I mean, at that point, she had not told Jamie everything. So I think there was still a part of her that she was holding back. And I think until you fully given yourself over to someone and being completely honest with someone, you can't really, you know, it's the bond's not fully formed. So I think at that point there was still this debate within her about, well, what was her choice going to be? I mean, do you leave everything you've known in the world that you know for this man, or you know, do you sacrifice everything? And you know, that's a big ask of someone, you know, and Claire is such an independent woman to give up everything she'd kind of known. You know, it was a difficult decision, but I think at the end of the day, you know, she couldn't live without him. So, you know, that was her choice.
Let's talk about the scenes of you at the Stones for a moment. I spoke with Ron Moore the other day, and he was talking about the actual shooting of those scenes, but particularly for the first episode. And he said something eerily wonderful happened during the shooting of the first scene. And he said there's the scene where all of a sudden there's a close-up of you and the wind picks up Claire's hair. And he said, we didn't plan on that. He said it was just this theatrical, wonderful thing that happened. I would love to know your picks for the year for scenes that were just up, that you didn't know were. For example, he also mentioned the wedding ring scene when it just twirls and twirls along the floor and suddenly stops in that perfect place and doesn't fall between the cracks. He said that wasn't planned. That was just in the moment, and it's just, of all the ways it could land, it landed that way. What other scenes from this year were just not planned, but just you found them in the moment and you went, wow, this is going to work?
Well, I think, you know, that scene that Ron was talking about when we first were up with the Stones, and it's when Claire, you know, when she goes to pick the flower. I mean, that place anyway. It is very magical. I mean, I think, you know, there's some kind of an ancient site at that location. You know, obviously we've put our stones there and everything, but there's a magical quality, and every time we go up there, you just feel it. You know, you feel it in you. There's just something incredible, and every time I film there, I just feel very aware of something ancient in the air or something. But I think other scenes like that. I mean, the last scene in the show when we were on the boat. I mean, that you know, that was one of those days where there was a lot of things going on. There's always these moving parts. But when they started doing the helicopter shots, I mean, it was just like the wind was going in the perfect direction, and Sam and I were sort of on this boat, and the helicopter's flying off, and you just feel, I don't know, it just feels very majestic, and it's such a pleasure to be in scenes like that, because you just feel that you're part of something really huge and great, and yeah, it just feels very special.
There's a podcast I listened to online with Terry, your customer, and Ron talking, and I think I'm getting the details of this right. Correct me if I'm wrong. Your first wedding to Frank, in the scene where you go back in time and you're in front of the solicitor's office, whatever it is, the judge's office, and did I understand her right that they tried to reproduce the outfit that you're wearing was a replication of what your own grandmother wore at her own wedding during the war, something like that, right?
Yeah, well, you know, my grandmother, she was a nurse during the Second World War, and you know, she was stationed in Southampton, and she passed away early in production. But when I got the job, and when, you know, I was sort of doing my research and all these nurses, you know, she was very much sort of part of my connection to Claire. And I, you know, I'd spoken to her on the phone, and I'd spoken with my mum a lot about her experiences and her time then. So when it came to the wedding, I'd taken a photo of my grandmother and my grandfather to Terry, and I'd said, look, you know, this is my grandmother at the time. And, you know, I think it's a few years after Claire and Frank's wedding would have been, but, you know, it was it was very much in that period. And I said, you know, I'd love to incorporate some of this in if we could. And Terry's like, oh my God, I'd love to do that. So it's not an exact replica, but it definitely has, you know, similarities. And Terry took it and thought about it when she was designing the outfit. And I brought it to the costume, or to the hair and makeup people as well. And, you know, so we tried to do little odes to my grandmother, because, you know, I feel like she was kind of that personal, emotional connection to Claire in a sense, because, you know, she's a woman that I knew very well of that time, and she has that kind of character that that I drew from a lot. So yeah, it was a nice thing to be able to do.
Oh, there've got to be other stories like that. Come on, think of it. What would the, you know, viewers, the fans viewing this show would love to know that that are just little winks from you guys out to something else that's significant and cool.
Well, I mean, I have lots of little coincidences. You know, these are silly little things, but when you first get a script, I always look for things that, I don't know, you know, have some sort of connection to your life. And when you get something that has a lot of things in there that you recognize, then you know, you always think, oh, this could be something good. And you know, I had an ex-boyfriend called Jamie, and I gave him a cat that was called Frank. And that was right before, you know, that was before I ever got this job. So, you know, I have a Jamie and Frank in my life. So it's always quite funny. But on set and things like, I don't know. It's, you know, there's so many things that it's one of those productions that everyone, I don't know, there's a great alchemy on set, and there's great things, you know, that happen. But it's one of those things you can never really think of specific moments.
I could think of one. Ron talks about that you sang a lot during the non-shooting things, and he said it was so charming they had to fit it into the actual show. Talk about that.
I wouldn't call it charming. Oh, I mean, I think it's a stress reliever for me. I didn't even notice that I did it so much until they started talking about it. But yeah, I mean, you know, there's a lot of time in between, you know, camera turning around, or they're fixing the lighting, where, you know, you don't have enough time to go off and read your book, or you don't have enough time to kind of leave the premises, but you've nothing else to do. And I think just to keep my mind sort of clear and whatever, I tend to sing, and I never know the lyrics to anything. So I make up my own lyrics. I sing out of tune. But Matt Roberts was like, I'm gonna make you sing one day, and I was like, no, you're not. So there was a lot of toing and froing about that, and then one day he was like, no, I've written it in, you're gonna be singing. And much to my mortification, they made me do it, but it was fun.
Oh, it was a lot of fun to watch too, especially the fact that they picked the Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy guy of all the songs.
Could you have picked any harder of a song? Thank you, guys.
You know,
yeah.
Ron told me the story too about how he hired you, and how you had just sent in an audition tape that he said they had looked through, you know, all kinds of Claire's previous to that, and then all of a sudden you had just sent in this thing blind. The audition, the casting directors looked at it and said, wow, something wonderful is here. And then they showed it to Ron and the other producers. And then in the home stretch, right before, he said, we were very close to shooting. You got the job. I want to know what was on that audition tape. What got you the job, do you think?
I don't know. I should ask them. You know, it was just one of those things that my manager gave it to me, and I taped, and you know, I'd had a nice vintage 40s dress, and I had a friend tape me, and it just was one of those things that went well, and I sent it in. And I mean, it was, I think it was 2 weeks from the time that they got the tape, or then I'd found out I was going to test with Sam, and then a week later I found out I got the job, and 3 days later I was in Glasgow. And it was such a whirlwind, and it was such a, you know, I didn't even have time to think about the fact that I was leaving LA or, you know, anything like that. It was,
So what did you actually perform on the tape?
oh,
Dramatically.
we performed, one of the scenes was this, you know, the writers will always say it was, you know, they hate that scene now, but it was the stop, help, he's going over scene, which is impossible when you're auditioning because it's a very physical scene. We're supposed to be on a horse, and then I jump off a horse and I tend to Jamie. And to do all that straight in front of a camera is quite difficult. And then the second scene was right after, it was after one of the love-making scenes of the wedding night. And it was their little pillow talk, I guess, scene. So yeah, those are the two scenes.
Well, let's talk about that wedding night. That was really interesting in two respects. First is it just takes the whole chauvinistic male assumption of sexual relations and turns it around. Here is Claire is the sexually experienced person and Jamie's the virgin. I just think that is hilarious.
That's so shocking for TV, though. It's
well, it's the genius of the show too, the sense of female empowerment. And I discovered the show this way. I'd heard a lot about it and I was interested about it, but I didn't have time to watch it. And then a couple times we ran some articles at Gold Derby, and anytime Outlander was even mentioned, didn't even have to be in the headline. It could be in the actual text of the piece. Traffic exploded. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And we kept thinking, and I developed such a curiosity about the show. I said, I really have to spend time. Or no, I had watched 1 or 2 episodes. That's what it was. So then I said, I got to back up and watch this thing from the beginning. And I binge watched it finally one weekend, and I was totally sold and swept up into it. And I mean, inside me is the little old lady screaming to get out. And I just bought the whole thing and went for the ride and thought, well, I get it now. I understand why it has this fanatical following. And I think one of the things is, let me quote the follow-up to that wedding night scene and get your thoughts on the taping of this. I think the greatest moment in the whole season 1 is the morning after. She flings the dress and the wedding ring rolls out, and then she picks it up and she holds out her 2 palms, and those 2 rings are there, and she holds them up to heaven as if to ask God, what do I do now? And it's wordless, and it says everything, and it's so theatrical and so powerful that it's great theater, don't you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the great thing about our show is that they allow for moments like that. I mean, there's so many times when we have these great scenes and it does feel like it's really theatrical, and you get to play these really big emotions, and you know, that's so wonderful. And you know, you're always, it's that ability to play this heightened life. But I think with Claire, it was what I loved about it was that it wasn't just this black and white, clear-cut romance. You know, that the minute that she finds this dashing young man, then it's done. And it's never that simple. And I think for Claire, there will always be this pull between these 2 men that loves in very different ways, but still nonetheless loves, you know. And I love that. I love that they allowed the time to take to explore those things.
Yeah. Now, I would ask a very stupid question because I haven't read the books and I don't know what this means. But after the witch trial, or during the witch trial, you spot the polio vaccine shot on the woman, and of course that just tips off viewers. Wow, there is another time traveler here. Is that, and then it's dropped, and I just love the fact that that was so suspensefully done. Is that ever resolved? In other words, does that come back again? Not necessarily that woman, because you're going to change locations now, you're off to France, but does that whole notion get picked up again in the story somewhere?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, all right, good. No, I don't know. I'm an idiot.
No,
I don't know.
I'm sticking with a book per season at the moment, so I've finished the first 2 books. My sister, who has read all of them, she informs me that yes, it does. That kind of notion comes back a few times, yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. Are there any things about any things you just want to really tell the fans that you don't think they know about Claire or about the season or about the books?
Oh, wow. What to, I mean, I
Because
feel like they are, I mean, they know the books and probably the show better than I do because they're so intense and it's wonderful. I mean, they watch it over and over and over. I mean, I'm just really excited for them to see season 2. I mean, that's what we've started, you know, we're in the middle of filming right now, and it's so strange because it's such a different show in one way, but yet, you know, it's very familiar. You have, you know, a lot of the same players, but it just takes on a whole new world. And it's so exciting. And what Terry Dressback and John Gary Steele has done is just incredible. So yeah, I don't know, I'm excited.
Well, it's also what you've done here. Now, come on, I think everybody who knows the show knows this. That you carry this part in such a way that there's a glow to you. There's this magnetic. You just beam this role out as if from an inner glow. And what is your take on this character? When you, for example, when she looks at Blackjack and she sees a face she hates intermixed with the face that she loves of Frank, and you have to deal with that as an actress. How do you approach that? What do you do? Those are the great complicated moments of the show.
Well, you know, a lot of it is, I mean, the great thing is that, you know, Tobias and I have such a great working relationship, and you know, unfortunately sometimes because of time scenes are cut, and there has been an awful lot of great Frank and Claire scenes that have been cut from production, and there was a flashback that would have been in the episode in Brockton where Claire and Blackjack have that big sort of scene where there's just the two of them in that room, and there was a flashback to Frank sitting, and Claire wakes up in the middle of the night, and Frank would have been sitting at a window, and he's kind of reliving the horrors of the war and kind of feeling the guilt of having sent men off to their death. Now, we never got to film that scene, but you know, obviously when you get the scripts, you do a lot of preparation on those things. And again, it's when I went into that room with Tobias as Blackjack and we're sitting doing that, I mean, that the knowledge of that scene is very much with me. And so when she sees and when she hears Blackjack talking about his sort of complicated feelings about what he's done in the horrors of war, and you know, to be able to recall that scene with Frank, and you know, it's constantly that play of, is the man that I love still, is there traces of him in this man, and can I reach him because of that? And Claire is just, you know, she will constantly look for any spark of goodness in someone, and she has such a capacity for empathy and such a capacity for wanting to, you know, help and understand that, you know, I think that's why her and Blackjack have such a great complicated relationship, because she can't just see him as well. I mean, I think things probably change after 15 and 16, but up until that point, you know, I think she still felt that there was a trace of humanity there that she could possibly reach.
As I was just mentioning, that this isn't just any show. This is a show that has a fanatical fan base. It has been, you know, critically received beautifully. It's getting, you know, 80–90% at the critics' aggregation scores of the TV critics. So it has the respect of the toughest group of opinion makers out there, and it has this absolute fanatical fan base from viewers. At what point did you know that this show had taken off? I mean, was it a fan coming up to you at a shopping mall, or was it a phone call from a family member that's saying, you know what, this, or was it your agent calling, or was it the network going, these numbers are astounding? At what moment did you know this is a hit?
I'm not sure. I mean, when we got the numbers in for the first weekend and they were really good, I mean, I think everyone was really excited about that. And I had a great moment where we were filming that scene with Claire and Dougal, you know, in where he does the marriage proposal. So we're in these dank, dark caves, and all the crew were in, and I had a really lovely moment where I got to sort of shout to everybody, you know, this is what we did, and you know, even though this might be a horrible day, we're you know, it's all been worth it. But you know, things like, you know, when we were back and we had the Paley Fest, I mean, that was incredible. I mean, just seeing that amount of people and having, you know, being invited to something like that at this point in our show, I mean, that then you kind of are like, wow, this is, you know, this is actually something really fantastic, because we have such an incredible fan base, and they're so active and they're so, you know, vocal. And but you know, not that you would ever take that for granted for a second, but you kind of, you know, you're used to their kind of passion at a certain point, and then when you see that it's sort of stepping a little bit outside of that, you're like, oh wow, you know, this is fantastic. So
final question, anything you can tease about season 2? You're shooting that now, aren't you?
Shooting it now, yeah. We've I mean, it's amazing. It's really, it's as I was saying earlier, it feels, you know, it feels like being back with all the same people, and it feels like we've come home again, but at the same point it's so different. I mean, I you know, I don't know what I can tease, but it's just get ready, because it's a visual feast, number one. Every day everyone is just like, wow, like this is our set, this is insane. And you know, I turn up in these costumes that everyone's like, whoa. But also, you know, I think what I'm most excited about is it's a very complicated journey that Claire and Jamie are on now. You know, what happened at the end of season 1, it really, the repercussions of that, and you know, they go deep, and it's a difficult journey for both of them to get past that, and to kind of find a new normal, I guess, in a sense. And you know, that, and I love that the writers have kind of really stayed with that story and let it continue, and we see the two of them figuring out a way to heal properly.
Well, I can't wait. I'm an actual fan, and there aren't many shows I can say that about. So congratulations, Caitriona.
Thank you so much. It's been so lovely to talk to you.
Same here. Bye-bye.
Bye.